Hi everyone, in this video we are going to look at a brief introduction into the rules and regulation governing letters of credit. Yes, letters of credit is an international trade payment method and this letter of credit is governed by Uniform Customs and Practice for Documentary Credits or UCP 600 in short. Now let's get into the video. What is UCP? UCP is a set of private rules which are put forward by ICC, International Chamber of Commerce. So they will govern on how letter of credit or documentary credit, in other words, is practiced by bankers. Now UCP was first introduced in 1933 and thereafter there have been 6 revisions to that. Each of the revisions I have shown here. The latest revision is the UCP 600. The revision was made in 2007 and UCP 600 was made effective from 1st July 2007 onwards. Now before that we had UCP 500. Some articles which were covered in UCP 500 but not included in UCP 600 are listed here. Just as a brief summary for you, Article 5, Article 6, 8, 12 and 38 were completely removed in UCP 600, but the other articles are merged and included in UCP 600 in various areas. Another thing you need to know is UCP 500 was a very vast document. It ranged up to about 47 to 48 articles, but if you go to UCP 600, it's limited to 39 articles only. Certain articles which were not included in UCP 500 was added in UCP 600. They didn't have an earlier article dedicated on definitions and interpretation. So in this UCP 600, the Article 2 and 3 clearly set out the definitions and various interpretations that they have when it comes to LC. Article 9 stipulates about how you need to act when you're advising credits and or amendments. Article 12 stipulates how a nomination should be done correctly. Article 15 tells you what is a complying presentation and how banks need to act when there is a complying presentation being submitted to them. Finally, Article 17 talks about what they mean by original documents and copies when it comes to handling of documentary credit. Now let's go through a brief summary of the articles. Now as I told you before, UCP 600 includes 39 articles. The first 5 articles starting from Article 1 to 5 stipulate about the application of UCP 600, their definition and interpretation. Remember what I told you earlier? Definition and interpretation was not there in UCP 500 but it was newly added in UCP 600. Thereafter, Article 6 is a very important article. Why? That governs about the availability of documentary credit, expiry of documentary credit and the place in which the presentation should be done. Similarly, Articles 7 to 8 talk about the responsibility and obligations of the banks, starting from the issuing and the confirming banks. Articles 9 to 11 govern on how advising needs to be done properly, and if advising of a credit has been done, what does it imply? How amendments need to be advised, whether it needs to be accepted or not, how you get the acceptances of an amendment, and how the amendment and the credit needs to be transmitted. Article 12 is specifically about nomination. Again, it's a new aspect being added to UCP 600. Article 12 talks about reimbursement. So when a complying presentation has been done and the exporter needs the money, the negotiating bank could pay the amount upfront and that amount needs to be reimbursed by the issuing bank. So the brief guidelines on the reimbursement is stipulated in Article 13. But there is a separate document called URR 725, which talks about reimbursement in detail. Again, we will have a separate video covering URR 725 as well. Article 14 to 17 talks about how documents need to be examined and what are the nature of the documents involved. Article 18 specifically talks about commercial invoice, how commercial invoice needs to be submitted, what are the essential aspects when it comes to an invoice, what needs to be there and what need not to be disclosed. Articles 9 to 27 talks about various transport document. It can be sea related transport document, air related transport document, multimodal transport document. All those transport documents are being dealt from Article 19 to 27, which is also an important part of UCP 600. Article 28 specifically talks about insurance documents. What kind of insurance documents are accepted when you are handling documentary credit? What is the minimum insurance cover required and how it needs to be calculated? All those are stipulated in Article 28. Article 29 talks about the situations or events in which you can extend the expiry of the documentary credit. Article 30 to 32 covers tolerance and partial drawing or shipments. So tolerance there speaks about whether there can be a plus or minus with relating to the value of goods being shipped, relating to the quantity of the goods being shipped, with relating to the price of the good being shipped. In what situation can you expect that tolerance? And is it there across all? That means whether it's for price, quantity as well as value, or if not just one matrix. All those are mentioned in Article 30 under tolerance. So 31 to 32 talks about partial and installment drawing or shipment, whether they are being accepted and if accepted, what ways in which it needs to be done. Article 33 talks about the hours acceptable for presentation. Article 34 to 37 talks about disclaimers and force majeure events. Force majeure events are events which are out of control of the banks, due to which there could be an unforeseen delay. If so, who should bear the obligation? Disclaimer talks about how parties involved to the documentary credit can remedy themselves. In what situation are they being excused from their obligations is mentioned in this disclaimer. Finally, Article 38 to 39 talks about transferable credit and assignment of proceeds under documentary credit. Transferable credit specifically talks about if you have a transferable documentary credit, where when you open up a back-to-back LC, it will be required. In that situation, what values are allowed to be increased, what values are allowed to be decreased, all those matters are dealt in Article 38. And 39 finally talks about assignment of proceeds under documentary credit. Yes, the exporter is entitled for the proceeds, and whether these proceeds could be assigned to somebody else is being dealt in Article 39. So with that, we are done looking at a brief introduction to UCP 600. In our next video series, you will see a in detail discussion of each article under UCP 600. So subscribe to Learning Business to improve your international trade and trade finance knowledge. Thank you so much for listening in. Subscribe to Learning Business for more videos.